Hello, and welcome to another episode of PGS All Stars. I'm your host, Rrr Mmmm. PGS All Stars is a show that features you, members of the post-geek singularity. On today's show, our guest is a well-known PGS member, musician, author, screenplay writer, and filmmaker, Russell Whitfield. We're going to be talking to him about what he loves about movies and so much more. Welcome to the program, Russell.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on to PGS All Stars. And I want to start off today's program by learning more about you. As you know, I created this program so PGS members could get to know other PGS members and creators. So let's find out more about your background. Can you please tell us how and why you became a member and contributor on the PGS?
Well, I think I started listening to a lot of YouTube podcasts round about, or just before the beginning of the lockdown, about 18 months ago. I think that's when it really took off for most people. And around about that time, I think there was a lot of talk around movies that I had a great deal of interest in, that there was rumblings about the Snyder Cut was maybe going to come out, maybe wasn't going to come out. And so I started to listen to and follow a number of channels, such as Gary at Nerdrotic, Midnight's Edge, Ryan Kinnell, all these kinds of things that were at that time sort of speaking my language. And I think it would have been on one of those, they were talking about Robert Meyer Burnett, and something had happened on Twitter, and there'd been a bit of a controversy about that. And then Robert was on one of the shows, and he seemed like a really, really nice guy, and he had a lot to say, and again was kind of speaking my language. And then I found out he had his own show, and I started listening to that back in the day. And I really, really enjoyed I especially enjoyed the format of Observations, where he attacks a news item, editorializes a little bit, discusses it, and then throws it open to his viewers. I thought that was a really unique thing. And obviously, Rob, working in the film industry, has a lot to say, and a lot of experience, and I just find it very, very interesting. And I think that the community in and around Observations, the post geek singularity, is a great community. It's one of the least divisive groups of fans that I've ever come across. Everybody seems to be on the same page, pretty much most of the time. And I think even when they do, or when we do disagree with each other, the disagreements are normally are always actually sort of friendly, and it's it's a nice place to be, I think. So that's pretty much now my regular go-to Observations and the Midnight Metal shows, and the Midnighter, as it was, and obviously your shows are which I'm a big fan of.
Well, thank you. And as I said, it's a pleasure to have you here. Do you happen to have a background in the theater arts or in the entertainment field?
No, not at all. I kind of fell into writing really as something that I'd always wanted to do. I mean, I studied theatre at school, stuff like that, but that doesn't really count. And I just went into the corporate world and got myself a normal job, but I'd always had a hankering to write, and I was always starting books and projects, and never actually finishing them. So no real professional background, or even an amateur background in that. Actually, it's just, as I say, it's just something I fell into.
Okay, and you did mention to us already that you saw other influences on YouTube and other social media, like many of us discovering Robert on YouTube. Can you please tell us about your involvement in heavy metal and goth music?
And how did you find out about that? Oh my goodness. Okay, so yeah, back in the day, I was convinced that I was going to be, my hometown's answer to Steve Harris out of Iron Maiden, and I got into. I was very, 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 very into heavy metal back in the good old 80s and 90s, and I was in a number of. There's a number of heavy metal bands, none of which were terribly successful. And then I started going out with a girl that was really into gothic music, and I really, really liked that. And I ended up in a goth band called the Looking Glass, which gathered some success on the North London circuit. And I've actually been friends with the singer, whose name is Sean Aston, and he's an incredibly talented guy, and he's got exams of music coming out of his ears. I've always called him Sean the Goth, and have done for the past 30 odd years, but he's a great guy. But unfortunately, the only Looking Glass stuff that exists is actually on cassette tape. So I can't. I'd love to share that with you. Well, no, actually, I wouldn't. I'm glad I can't share it with you. Yeah. So that was kind of my involvement in it back then. And then I had later involvement in songwriting and all that stuff. Maybe about 10 years ago now, I managed to write a song and things like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you mentioned Iron Maiden, and I'm sure you probably are already aware that they have a new album which came out, I think, a few days ago.
Yes.
Have you had a chance to check that out?
I absolutely have, and it's my favorite Iron Maiden album since Brave New World. Since that was when Bruce Dickinson came back, and that was ages ago. And they've released a lot of stuff, but this, for me, Shinjetsu, was a real return to classic. It's a real classic Maiden album, and I listened to the whole thing, and it's all killer, no filler. I really loved it. So yeah, absolutely smashed it. I mean, the last one, The Book of Souls, was pretty good. It was pretty good. I saw it on tour. I took my daughter to her first heavy metal concert, which was great in the O2 in London. But this one, I think, is a better album all round. I really, they absolutely smashed it. But Maiden always smash it. It's just varying degrees of awesome when it comes to Iron Maiden, I think.
Oh, very good. Very good. And so that we definitely need to check it out. I ordered it, but I haven't listened to the entire thing, and it sounds fantastic. So I can't wait to hear the rest.
It really is all killer. It really is all. I can't recommend it highly enough. I think Rob did a show on it, I think on the release day last Saturday, I think.
Yes, a Midnight Metal. We were discussing it, and it's just so exciting to see them still producing work, and an entire album at that. And from what I've seen, I think they're also planning a tour. So lucky person who gets a ticket to see them, if the tour happens, that'd be great too.
You have to join the fan club. That's what I did last time. So I knew that the fan club would get tickets early, so I stumped up the cash for a yearly membership to join the fan club in order to get the tickets, because my daughter Samantha really wanted to go. She really wanted to go, or did I really want her to go? I don't know. I'm going to come down 50-50 on that, but I really wanted to go, and she kind of wanted to go, so I had to get the tickets. And because the album, the last two albums have come out on her birthday, which is 4th of September. So.
Oh, that's nice. Now, let's talk about your publications. You have you've written 3 novels and 3 novellas, several screenplays, often with a female-centric focus. What draws you to write about women and feature female characters in your stories?
Well, when I first started doing it, it wasn't the norm. And now I've kind of missed the boat on that. It all started out, I'd always thought, well, I think everybody can write a novel. Anybody can write a novel. If you can string a sentence together, you can do it to a greater level of success. But I would encourage anyone to try it. I think the hardest part about writing a book is not starting it, it's finishing it. It's a real grind. And I found before I wrote my first novel, I would start things, get so far with them, and then I'd have a better idea for something else, and then I would drop what I was doing. And I think that the first thing I learned was you've just got to bite down on the gum shield and get to the finish line. So I was reading a set of a 4-book series, and I thought this was a brilliant idea. It was kind of like a historical fantasy, and it had Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, and I thought, my God, this is amazing. It's like a crossover before there were crossovers, and I ordered them all off of Amazon. And the idea, the concept was brilliant, but the execution, and I hate to say it, just wasn't great. And I thought to myself, look, if this guy can get published, surely I can. Because you need a little bit of bloody-mindedness about this. And round about that time, there was a documentary come on the Discovery Channel, called, I think it was called Gladiator Girl. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And because I've always studied Greek and Roman history, and I found out there were female gladiators, and I thought there's got to be a book in that. There's got to be a story there.
Right.
And I found out that there's in Halikarnassus, which is now Bodrum in Turkey, in the beginning of the 20th century, they dug up a frieze of two women fighting, and it has their stage names underneath. So one was called Amazona, and one was called Achillea, and above that it said they were freed. Which
Oh,
means,
wow.
yeah. So in order to be freed as a gladiator, you had to put on a bit of an epic performance.
Right.
But all we know is their stage name. So I don't know if you remember the show American Gladiators, and you would have Jet and
yes.
Nitro and things like that. So the old ancient gladiators also had that. So they were called Hercules, or in this case, Amazona and Achillea.
Right.
But that's all we know. So I thought, well, that's like carte blanche. And I only ever seen one book about a lady gladiator before that, which was written by a brilliant author called Donna Gillespie. The first book was called The Light Bearer. I recommend you check it out. It's literary historical fiction, and I kind of wrote trash historical fiction. So, but Donna was a massive inspiration to me, and this is right back at the dawning of the internet when I first made contact with her, and I sent her fan mail, and she was a real help to me. So yeah, I wrote a book called Gladiatrix, which is the Latin feminine of gladiator, but everyone thought it was a sort of dominatrix story, and I sent it out to many agents and publishers, and I kept getting rejected, and then it just landed on a guy called Ed Handyside's desk for a publishing company called Myrmidon Books. And it goes to show that it's not necessarily how good you are, it's how lucky you are. Because why would X amount, 30 odd people reject it and then one guy accept it? It's just the luck of the draw on the day. So he liked it, and I learned a lot in that process about how working with an editor will just completely improve everything that you've done. It really is like a massive collaboration, and I had no idea. And working with Ed really improved the first book. Although having said that, I think I do think my first one is the weakest one, because I was still learning as I was doing it. But Ed improved it and turned it into something not really publishable into something publishable, and that was mission accomplished. And I went to the bookshop and I saw my book in there, and I was like, yeah. And I had to do a little bit of a book tour, and it's not like you're Stephen King or anything like that. It's actually, you're just like an extra person working at the bookstore going, will you not buy my book and I'll sign it for you? Which, if you haven't got any gumption about you, is a bit of a hard task. And I didn't really enjoy doing it, to be honest with you. Yeah. And then I kind of forgot about it and thought I would do something else. And I got an email a couple of months later saying, how are you getting along with the sequel? I'm like, what sequel would that be? The one I haven't started writing yet. And it took another couple of years to do that, which was called Rrr Mmmm, which is the continuing adventures of the gladiatrix from the first one. And then I did a third one called Imperatrix, which was borderline historical fantasy. But I'm very proud of the second and third books. I think they're pretty good. Although if I do want some humility, I can go onto Amazon and get insulted by people I don't even know. But by and large, the feedback's okay.
No, all sounds amazing. I love that you, as I said, that you had a female focus, and I can see how people would confuse the name of that first book with something else. But clearly you have a passion for ancient Greek and Roman culture, with many of your books and stories focusing on that time period. Would you consider yourself a classical scholar?
Absolutely not. No. I have a decent knowledge of it, but I'm no way a classical scholar. I got interested in it at a very, very young age. I can tell you why. I was watching a film on the telly here in England, and I think I must have been 6 or 7 years old. and I always used to show historical epics on a Sunday. It was kind of just a thing, and they probably still do. And I saw a thing called the 300 Spartans, which was a 60s film starring Richard Egan, and I just thought that I can remember thinking how cool I thought they looked with the, their helmets and all this sort of thing, with the crests on them. And of course, at the end of the spoiler alert, at the end of the 300 Spartans all die.
Right.
And of course, my young mind couldn't handle this. I was waiting for them to be rescued, and I kept thinking, well, when's this rescue going to come? And of course, they didn't. They were, they were all killed in real life, and they were all killed in the movie. And it just ignited a passion for these stories. So then I went down to the library and I found out more about it, and I found out all about the Greek myths. And of course, I don't know if they still do it, but certainly in those days they used to have books for retold for children. So you'd get the Trojan War for children, and the Iliad for children, the Odyssey and stuff like that. And yeah, as I got older, the love of it just stayed with me to this day. In fact, so I was really pleased when I saw the Troy movie, or certainly the director's cut of that. And then, of course, before that we had Gladiator. So there was a little bit of a resurgence in the Sword and Sandals movies a few years ago. So I was all over it. I loved it. But yeah, it's been a lifelong passion of mine, and that's kind of how I got involved with the novellas. So what happened with those was there's a bunch of historical fiction authors. Well, there's loads of us, but when you're actively writing, which I don't actually actively write novels anymore. When I was, it's like an old man and an old ladies club. You all know each other on Facebook, and you're all emailing each other all the time. Mm-hmm. And before I got involved, a dear friend of mine called Ben Kane, he's a fabulous author and a wonderful bloke as well. He got involved with a bunch of British and American authors, and they wrote a collaborative novel. And I think it was called A Day of Fire or something like that. And it was all about the eruption of Pompeii. And the book was quite successful. So on the next one, Ben invited me to come along and work with him, work with a bunch of other authors on A Year of Ravens. I think Ben did the foreword for that one. And that was all about the invasion of the Boudiccan uprising against the Romans. So everybody wrote a chapter. And what you find if you write a chapter or a slice of a novel, essentially a novella, we ended up with a 120,000 word book, and it was quite well received. And then we rolled on to the next one, which was a Song of War, which is about the Trojan War. And I had a hard job on that one. I had to write a story from the perspective of Agamemnon, which is, of course, he's the villain of the piece. And I had to find a way to sort of make Agamemnon sympathetic, but make him at least his actions understandable. And I think that from what I read a few reviews of it, and that was quite well received. And then we did my last contribution to it was the Odysseus one, Sea of Sorrows, and they wanted me to come back and do another one after that, but I'd kind of moved on since then. I hadn't written a novel in the longest time, so I just didn't think it would. I didn't think I was any longer part of the H team. I thought it would be better if they had more active novelists on there, so I didn't do it.
Well, it sounds very interesting. And, we all know those classic stories from that time period. I remember Gladiator, that movie, the one with Russell Crowe, and the one Troy. And they were just wonderful films, and the stories are just timeless. So I love that you decided or have decided to feature that in so much of your work. And it's always an entertaining story talking about that time period. So I think it's a very interesting choice. Now,
they're timeless stories, aren't they?
Yes.
That's why they've been with us for such a long time. Homer's Iliad is the first great piece of literature that we had in the West, and I know that there's some dispute around whether he wrote it or whether it was a bunch of people that wrote it. But it's got all of the themes in there. And what I do like about fiction as we have it today is that people do different spins on it. And I read a great one. Oh my God. By an author called Susan Curran called The Mouse God. And I think it came out in the late 80s. Right. And I absolutely loved that book. And of course, I lost it, because it was a long time ago. And then about 10, 15 years ago, I was just in a charity shop and I saw it. And there were two copies. It was a hardback and a paperback. And I grabbed them and I've still got them. It was such a brilliant book.
Wow. You were lucky to find them. And I love when you go into bookstores like that. and you're not looking for that, but then you come across these treasures, like a book that you've seen before, or something that you've always wanted to read, and now you can pick it up. So you're very lucky to find that.
I was.
And so I have another question. I grew up in New York watching martial arts films on Saturdays. So if anybody who's watching this is from New York and grew up in the 70s and 80s, so to speak, Channel 5, I believe, was the channel, or 9. I'm sure there's someone out there that knows the exact channel, watching these martial arts films. And I watched them every Saturday for hours and hours. And I wanted to ask you, what was your initial exposure to the action and or martial arts film genre?
Okay, well, again, this is when I was really, really small. My mum was a waitress, and she had to work evenings, and she would always take me up to my grand's place in Shepherd's Bush on the train. And I remember you'd have to change at a station called Hammersmith in West London, and you'd have to cross over to the other side of the road. But the place in Hammersmith had a newsstand, and back in the day there was a magazine called Kung Fu Monthly, and I was really very small, and it was a poster magazine, so you had all these articles, and you would open it out and there'd be a big picture always of Bruce Lee and that was the first time I'd ever seen it. And he had all the scratches and the scars, and I was too young to really understand it. But as I got older, so I was born in the 70s, but really sort of grew up in the 80s.
Right.
And the beginning of the 80s was really when I started watching films that I shouldn't have been watching on VHS. All right. So after Enter the Dragon came out in 1973, there was obviously loads and loads and loads of Hong Kong movies, going onto the American market. As the advent of video came along, I mean, I look back on it with such fondness, and it's different today. But going down to, and it was before Blockbusters had come to England. There'd be loads and loads of little video stores around the town where I live. You'd go in there every week, and there'd be just wall to wall of like horrific covers. I Spit on Your Grave and all that kind of stuff. But also there were karate movies in there, and you could spend all of your money in the video shop. So you'd go and you'd get videos on a Friday after school, and go take them home and watch them. And that's really where I got my first exposure to that. So there was all the Canon movies. There was a company called Golan Globus,
right,
and they were the Chuck Norris, John Claude Van Damme ninja guys. And there was so many to choose from. And then you had the 70s Hong Kong ones that were still floating around. But I have to say, and martial arts purists will probably tear me a new one for this, but I was never really into the Hong Kong stuff. I much preferred the American ones. I much preferred John Claude Van Damme. I loved Chuck Norris and all that sort of thing. And I'm embarrassed to say I also used to rate Steven Seagal. Which is now apparently not a very popular thing, but he was great back in the day. And you know what? He's still doing his thing, so fair play to him. But yeah, that's how I got into it. And I then also decided I was going to be Bruce Lee, so I took up martial arts and I studied it for years and years and years. And my last instructor of many years ago is he became my best mate, actually, a guy called Steve. And he confidently informed me that I would never be any good at Wing Chun as long as I had a hole in my ass. So it's kind of like 20 years wasted. But yeah, I'm too old and slow for that stuff now.
Oh, that's very interesting. I picked up judo for a few years, and then after, when I started to get old, I said, this is kind of difficult, maybe. And judo is not sort of like a fast moving martial arts activity at all. But I had difficulty with that. So, there wasn't a chance I was going to pick up any of the harder versions of martial arts, but I have to give you credit for studying it. And it is fun to do that. And I also want to ask you, and you did start to name some of your favorite action stars, but I did want to ask you about some of your favorite action and martial arts directors and films.
Oh my goodness! So in terms of directors, there's a guy called Isaac Florentine, And Isaac's been working in this industry for the longest time, and he's a top bloke as well. I dropped him a line once, and he came straight back, which is so rare in the film industry.
Right.
Someone to do that. Because we're working on a film at the moment, and I wanted to ask him for some advice, and I thought, he's never going to come back, but he did. And he has done some top draw movies. The most recent ones that he did was a series of two ninja movies with a guy called Scott Adkins, who's I want to be Scott Adkins when I grow up. I think he's absolutely fantastic. He's a brilliant martial artist and a brilliant actor. So Isaac's work is definitely out there. And I found out, because I didn't pay attention to such things, but years ago he did a film called Savat, which is a French martial art with a guy called Olivier Gruner. It was set in the Old West, and I loved that movie, and I've still got it on DVD, like this rickety old DVD that I got out of Blockbusters for £3, and he directed that one. But because Isaac's been practicing karate now for 100 years, or he's literally practicing not 100 years, but he's practiced it his whole life. He knows how to shoot it, and he only works with really, really great martial artists.
Right.
And what you find, if you watch any action movie or martial arts movie with any sort of critical eye, which I know is lame, and I would only do it on the third or fourth watching of it, you can see when the actor and the performers and the director are confident in what they're doing, because you get lots of long shots and long takes. Now, this is not to decry something like Jason Bourne or Liam Neeson, Taken and all that sort of thing, but you find if you watch those movies, they're all shot very close, and they're very kinetic and very jumpy and shaky cam, because it's to hide the fact that these people have not been doing martial arts their whole life. But if you take someone like Scott Adkins or Michael J. White, somebody like that, or Amy Johnston, she is the best action martial artist on screen today at the moment by far, I think. You can do long shots, long takes, and you can see them doing all the choreography. So yeah, Isaac's work. There's another guy called Jesse V. Johnson, who does a lot of work with Scott. They did loads of stuff together. One of my favorite ones by them is called Accident Man, which is based on a comic, and it's got pretty much every working martial arts actor in it today. It's almost like a stealth Expendables. Michael J. White's in it. Phil Park, who was Darth Maul in one of the Star Wars movie, he's in it.
Yes.
Amy's in it. Michael's in it. Scott's in it. So it's just a tour de force of brilliant martial arts. And he did Debt Collectors and Savage Dog and Debt Collectors 2. So all of which are Scott Adkins movies. And there's a guy that works out of Hong Kong called Bay Logan, and he's just done anything you can think of. He was involved. He's been into the martial arts scene for 30 years now, maybe getting on 40 years. He started off writing for the Kung Fu magazine I was talking about back then, and then he moved into movies, and he was involved in the Kickboxer reboot, for example. He did both of those, and a ton of stuff. He's absolutely done a ton of stuff. And I'm actually talking to him about a script that I wrote today, funny enough. I got an email from him today. So hello, Bay, if you're watching this, it's a good script, I promise.
Yeah, I have to agree with you a lot of what you said about so many of those great films that you mentioned and the stars that were in them. And I did see The Accident Man, which you recommended to me. So, in all fairness, I've seen it and it was a fantastic film. And, you and I have been talking about certain things that we're always looking for in these films. And since after watching for 20 years, just like you, 20 years, 30 years of watching these films, we're always looking for things like what position is the star in relationship to the other fighters. And when you get those long action scenes where there's just a wonderful sequence of martial arts movements and stunts and events, it's just so exciting to see that, because you know how long and hard they worked to create that one part. I mean, so much practicing and so much physical, ability that they're expressing in these scenes. And it really does make it special. So I definitely agree with you on so much of that. And,
oh my God. In Isaac's one, he did these two ninja films with Scott, as I say. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the second one. It's called Ninja Shadow of a Tear. Don't let the title put you off. It's a brilliant film. But Scott goes into like a karate school. and he's looking for information. And of course, the karate guys don't want to give him the information.
Right.
And Kel Surprise, there's a huge fight in the karate school, and it's I think it's Scott versus 3 or 4 karate black belts. It's one shot, one take. They did the whole thing.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
insane.
Oh
It's
my gosh.
absolutely insane that
Yeah.
they managed to pull that off. But you can only do that with someone like a Scott Adkins or a Michael Jai White or a Ray Park or whatever, who have been doing this their whole lives. Or Tony Jaa is another one. There's in one of Tony Jaa's movie, he's having this fight in this kind of nightclub place, and you can see again it's all done in one take, and you can actually see him becoming more and more fatigued as it comes to the end of the take. But you've really got to know what you're doing, and the stunt people have got to trust you. You've got to trust yourself, and certainly the director's got to trust you. But yeah, definitely worth a watch. Is Ninja Shadow of a Tear. Highly recommended.
Yeah, I definitely have to check it out. And as you said, the actual, watching this artist, this performer get tired, it adds some authenticity to what you're watching, because, no one's going to have that much energy for that period of time. In some cases, we're talking about 2.5, 3 minute sequence that's incredibly long for what we're talking about. And it's just so arduous, even the attempt of it all. And to see something like that, I mean, that's so exciting. One take, that's sort of just wonderful to see. So I'm gonna have to check those out. I have to add those onto my list.
One thing I would add, I have been remiss. Of course, I said I didn't really like the Hong Kong movies. I don't want to get torn to pieces for this, but I have to mention Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is the king of all time, and I've noticed in latter years people sort of saying, "Oh, was he that good? And could he beat this? And could he beat that?" For me, he is the absolute. He's the icon. The first one, the best one. Every single film he made is, even the Hong Kong ones or whatever. They're absolute classic. The man was a genius, and if not for him, we wouldn't be having this conversation. There wouldn't be a Scott Adkins. There wouldn't be a martial arts film industry in the West if not for that. That guy was an absolute genius, and he had his whole philosophy of Jeet Kune Do. And I had to mention that because I didn't mention it before. So yeah, he's the king.
Yeah, and we could do a show just on Bruce Lee. He's so spectacular and has left a lasting impression on all of us who love action, who love martial arts. I think it's Enter the Dragon. I could be wrong, because I don't know all the titles of his films, but he even had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in one of his films.
Game of Death.
It was just so, like, the idea of having, this, and of course Chuck Norris a lot of times too. Am I correct, Russ?
Chuck Norris was in one called Way of the Dragon, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was in Game of Death, which Bruce Lee shot a lot of. And then unfortunately he passed away just after Enter the Dragons. I think the story goes he was doing Game of Death, and he had to stop doing Game of Death to do Enter the Dragon, and then sadly he passed. But his story about Game of Death, after Bruce Lee had passed away, Golden Harvest, the production company, still had rights, and they had this Bruce Lee footage, and they released a film which used a number of doubles and stand-ins and even a cardboard cutout of Bruce Lee to try and hack this stuff together.
Right.
And it was pretty awful, although the soundtrack was great. It was done by John Barry, the James Bond guy. So the Game of Death soundtrack is chef's kiss good. But the film itself, not so much. However, at the end of it, you have him fighting a Korean sort of Tang Soo Do expert, and then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and his other little bits and pieces of him fighting. But the rest of the footage had never been seen. Now, remember I was talking about that guy called Bay Logan. I think it was about 10 years ago. He uncovered all of this unseen footage of Game of Death and released it on. There was a huge, big Bruce Lee package video released, and it had the uncensored, uncut fights of the entire end of Game of Death, which went on for, I think, about 30 minutes. So you had him fighting Danny Onisanto with the nunchuckers. You had the full fight of the Korean guy. You had Bruce Lee's mates in the film, and they get beaten up first, and he goes in and takes them all out. It's I can't remember the name of it now. I think it's The Legend of Bruce Lee or something like that. But it's an in-depth documentary about the man and his life, done with much love, because Bay's a huge fan of Bruce. And then you get this uncensored, unreleased footage of Game of Death, which I think you could probably find on YouTube now, because it was back in the day. But yeah, it was fantastic, and a great loss. It's hard to believe. Like, I think he'd be in his 70s now, same, maybe even in his 80s, Bruce Lee. But yeah, his impact is still been felt to this day.
Certainly. And I believe that the documentary you're referring to, I think, is on Netflix. And
wow.
Yes, and in the documentary, and whoever's watching this will, I'm sure, will put in the comments about, no, it's on Amazon or whatever, but wherever it is, it's on a streaming service, and I watched it. And in the documentary is also Lee Onisanto, who is a martial artist. I think Bruce Lee was her godfather, and she's in the Mandalorian series, where she plays one of the characters who fights against Ahsoka Tano in the second season. And she's a very well accomplished, well-known martial artist as well. And in that documentary, they talk about, just how they were trying to figure out this dilemma after Bruce Lee unfortunately passed away. They knew that they had a gem in this footage, and that it was marketable. Even after his death, there was such a high demand. And even now there's a high demand for anything associated with Bruce Lee. Fairly recently, in some collectors who collect premium format or one-to-one scale collectibles, I think it's Prime One Studios, I could be wrong, but one of those larger studios that creates statues and figures have actually made one of Bruce Lee. It's like a bust of Bruce Lee, and one of his famous poses that we're accustomed to seeing him in, that we've all done. We've all kind of, done these poses.
Just before this interview, in fact, I was. I'm joking.
Well, as we're sort of just enjoying the fun and the experience of martial arts, and I think that that's what he did, was that he brought it to the forefront and made it enjoyable, or something that we wanted to do. We always liked it, but because he was so charismatic and made it, he had his school in San Francisco where he taught students, and he didn't discriminate, so it was open to any ethnicity of people who wanted to study. And I think that, his approach was that it's for everyone. And I think, that was very appealing to a lot of people. And, it really kind of opened the doors, another activity or another wonderful way to kind of do martial arts for everyone. So there's that.
Certainly, there's the myth behind that, isn't there? Or, I mean, the story goes that the Chinese community did not want him teaching, non-Chinese, their secrets, and that's been built up in different stories. But it was confirmed by his wife that he did have a fight with a guy called Wong Jack Man over it, which is dramatized in Dragon, the Bruce Lee story with Jason Scott Lee. And there is a Chinese or a Hong Kong movie about Wong Jack Man that tells a story from his point of view as well. But that certainly did happen. And because he won that fight, he was allowed to, well, he was going to go teach people anyway. But you're absolutely right. He didn't discriminate. He did think martial arts were for everybody. And then his philosophy really expanded on what traditional martial arts were. And a lot of it he found, wasn't useful, wasn't working. So in some ways, him with his Jeet Kune Do, he was really the first MMA guy because he did take from all martial arts. His philosophy was, take what was useful and discard the rest and personalize it for yourself. So Jeet Kune Do had a Wing Chun base because that was the thing he studied in Hong Kong with Yip Man. But after that, he went on and he studied boxing and judo and karate and all of these things, and adapted that style for himself. I think he was 5 foot something, and he was a small guy, so he would concentrate his movements, be very small and very direct. But that style isn't going to work for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's going to adapt the movements to someone who's huge. But yeah, the father of MMA, I would say.
Yeah, and it is wonderful to celebrate that so many years after he's introduced us all to this, and we're still enjoying his legacy. And I still enjoy watching his films, which are, 40 years old now. That shows you the importance not only of him culturally, let's say in the action martial arts, you know, entertainment area, but also influence, which we're going to talk a little bit more about as well. But I have another question for you.
Sure.
And, you know, we've all been waiting for Shang-Chi. There's been so much anticipation about this film, and it was recently released Friday, September 3rd, I think was the official release date in the US. I wanted to ask, have you seen the film, and do you think its success in the box office over the weekend indicates a turnaround for the box office worldwide?
Well, yes, I have seen it. And I am surprised at its success, because a lot of commentators on YouTube that I've been watching have been predicting it's going to be a complete disaster and a complete flop. And honestly, I'm starting to. I don't want to be critical, but I'm starting to sort of tire of the constant sort of negativity that seems to be driving a lot of channels lately, which is why I love the PGS and Rob, because it's never negative. You know, it's always like a positive thing, because we're supposed to love movies. So is it a turnaround? Honestly, I don't know. I hope so, but with this bloody COVID, you know, you never know. But I think part of its success will certainly be down to the fact that many places are starting to open up now. Here in the UK, we're pretty much open. So when I went to the cinema, I went with my daughter for her pre-birthday do, and the screen we were in was packed, and there were people queuing up, and you could hear people talking about the movie. So I really hope that this is the beginning of a new beginning, and that things do start to open up. In terms of the movie itself, it's a Marvel film, and I think it walked the line between being a Marvel movie and being a wushu movie like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and was trying to balance out stuff for a Western audience and pleased an Asian audience, I guess, because a lot of it, at the beginning of it, was in Chinese and all the rest of it. I thought the action sequences were great. They're never going to be what I want out of a martial arts movie, because you know what, it's a PG-13 movie, so you're not going to see, you know, arm breaks and blood and all that sort of thing. But
Right.
what the hell, you know, it was a comic book movie, and it was absolutely fine. And I find this with many Marvel, in fact with all Marvel movies, I think they're always brilliant, they're always entertaining, but I find all of the Marvel stuff a little bit McDonald's. Like, I go and I will voraciously eat it up, but when it's done with, I probably won't go back and want to go back and revisit it. But on the whole, you know, for me, 3.5, 4 stars out of 5. I really like the fact that they brought. Oh, can I talk spoilers or not?
I
They brought a character back from one of the earlier movies who
oh,
who
okay.
kind of needed to be addressed, and is a very venerable actor playing him. And it was nice that they brought him back, and it was a faintly comedic role, and I rather enjoyed his return.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a very famous Chinese actress in it as well.
Michelle Yao.
Yes, okay, you can say that. Yeah, she was absolutely fantastic, and always a pleasure to watch. But it's interesting. I was listening to someone on a YouTube channel that I follow called Viking Samurai, and he was doing an interview again with funny enough, Bay Logan, about this, and he was asking the question, will there ever be another Bruce Lee or Jackie Chan or John Claude?
Mm-hmm.
And what Bay Logan was saying was probably not. And this is why you find that people like Scott or Michael J. White or whatever have never really made it into the mainstream, because studios would rather go with an actor that is a known quality that they can teach to do martial arts and make them look brilliant, as opposed to getting a martial artist and investing money into the martial arts to try and break them. Simu Liu, that was in Shang-Chi, was actually a brilliant example. He's come out and said many times, you know, I'm not a martial artist. You know, I can do acrobatics, but he's never really trained in martial arts. But yeah, the geezer looked like he was an absolute expert. And you saw that again in another fun movie, the G.I. Joe one, Snake Eyes.
Right.
So you had Andrew Koji, who's in the Warrior TV show, and if you've not seen the Warrior TV show, I highly recommend it. It is absolutely fantastic, based on the writings of Bruce Lee. Koji's a martial artist, and he's a brilliant martial artist. And you had also Henry Golding in it, who isn't a martial artist, but they were both, being ninjas, and they were running on things and sword fighting and all that, and it looked fantastic. So yeah, to answer your question, I hope so. I hope this is a turning point. I remain vaguely pessimistic. I fear another lockdown in October, but you never know. But I hope not. But yeah, I enjoyed the movie, and I wish it all the success. I really hope it goes far, because for a fan of martial arts movies, it's kind of like, if that one's a success, then people will be looking for the next martial arts movie. And seeing as I've written 2 in the past couple of years, I'm kind of hoping that I can maybe ride on the coattails of success to thank you, Shang-Chi and Snake Eyes.
Yes, and why do you think martial arts and or action films, for example, Fast 9 and even Shang-Chi, which is doing well, and I didn't look at the numbers today, but I'm sure after yesterday, it's made more money. Why do you think that these films have captured audiences and drawn them back to the cinemas?
Because it's, I think it's pure escapism. I mean, there is a time and a place for, going to the cinema and being made to think. And there's a time and a place to go to the cinema just to watch something entirely nonsense, and you can get caught up in the escapism of it all. But also with the skill, certainly in the case of Shang-Chi or Snake Eyes or something like that, it's the skill of these performers. I mean, they're absolutely fantastic. You can say Simu Liu hasn't done martial arts, but the stuff that guy was doing, it was unbelievable. I couldn't do that. The sciatica would kick in, and I'd be on the floor, and that'd be the end of it. And there's a beauty in all of it, and it's just good fun. I haven't seen the latest Fast and the Furious, but a lot of people, a lot of the reviewers that I've watched on YouTube have said it's jumped the shark. But as I mentioned before, one of the things about your show and PGS and Rob's Relations and all that I like is that they try to look at the positives of these things. So I'm not sure whether to trust the reviewers now when they're going, oh, it's awful, because it seems to be a prevailing trend that everything seems to be awful these days. And I've found, with the evidence of my own eyes, it's not the case. One of the ones that was getting a right kick in was Mortal Kombat with Lewis Tan, the Mortal Kombat reboot, and that was great. That was ticking all the boxes as far as I was concerned, bearing in mind I'm not a huge gamer, but that was delivering, because that was showing martial artists that are really good martial arts, and it was bloody and it was violent, and right, you had the characters from the game. So I really enjoyed that one. So I think in answer to your question, yeah, it's escapism. Don't forget, it probably now is not the time to be writing or watching deep and meaningful movies. I think people have been locked down. We've all had a rough time. People have been sick, and it's time to get out and just enjoy ourselves. And I think films like Shang-Chi and Fast and Furious, as nonsense as they might be in terms of plot, if we want to get nitpicky about it, but why would we? Because it's a Fast and the Furious or a karate Marvel movie. It's just great fun. Let's go to the cinema and have a laugh,
Yes, and I agree. And I love to see films like this. These are definitely some of my favorite films. And I admit it was exciting to go to the theater on Friday, which is when I saw Shang-Chi, and see it. I saw it in IMAX, and I'm going to go back and see it again in either 3D or 2D, one of those other ones, because I want to see it in 3D and see if it looks any different. But you're absolutely right about the lead in Shang-Chi. Some of the moves he was doing, were phenomenal, especially the one, my favorite was the scenes where they were on a scaffold, and, there's a lot of bumps and bruises on a set like that. And while it's true that, they use CGI for it, he still has to swing around and kind of jump and leap and do some of those things. So, I'm sure there were a lot of black and blues the next day after doing something like that. And it looked amazing.
Yeah, it really did. Rrr, did you see any other films on Friday? I have to
I
ask.
did. I saw Tango Shalom with Michael Lito.
Was it good?
It was fantastic. It was fantastic. And, anybody who sees this, if Tango Shalom is still in the theater or if it's on video on demand, I strongly recommend it. You won't be disappointed in it. So
I will try and check it out myself. I must check it out on Amazon or Netflix here. I'm not sure if we have it yet in England.
Well, we've talked about famous action and martial artists and pretty much their influence culturally and other films and entertainment. And I wanted to ask you about what are some of your favorite things that are inherent in action and martial arts films that make their way into other films and media that you've noticed?
I really think that the actual fighting styles have now become the norm, and this really started in the 1980s, where you always had these A movies and B movies, and you'd have the guy that he's always an ex special ops guy, isn't he? And they're always experts in karate, and it bled into that, and we're absolutely now so used to seeing really cool martial arts in any action movie. And the one I think really took the world by storm actually was the one they teach the Israeli armed forces is Krav Maga, because that's a really, really brutal style. And I think they were using a lot. They were certainly using Wing Chun in Jason Bourne, and they were using a lot of Krav Maga. And in Liam Neeson's one, Taken, that was a lot of Krav Maga. So I think the influence of the stylized stuff that we saw in the 80s pure martial arts movies then became part and parcel of any action movie. But what you would find in the non-pure tournament movie or martial arts movie where you have the boss fight at the end of it, you'd see less fancy moves and not so much of the big standoff and the high kicks and the flying kicks, but all of these fight sequences now are using martial arts. That came in as well as part of the Matrix, didn't it? They brought in the Hong Kong crew to teach Keanu and Lawrence Fishburne and all those guys how to do it. So I think that the classical martial arts movies have now just bled into pretty much everything we do. Even in Marvel, you saw this in Iron Man and in Sherlock Holmes. Of course, Robert Downey Jr. is a massive Wing Chun guy. So if you actually watch Iron Man fighting, and certainly at the beginning of Sherlock Holmes, he's using pure Wing Chun there. So if you're a Wing Chun guy or a martial arts guy, rewatch one of the Iron Man movies, and you'll see, and he's doing all this kind of Wing Chun stuff as Iron Man, which I thought was pretty cool.
Interesting. Now, I also wanted to know, do you collect physical media of any kind, or do you have other collections?
I used to have a hideous amount of DVDs because I was a terrible go down to Blockbusters or go down to HMV, as we used to have your version of Best Buy, our version of Best Buy, sorry. And I would go and I would buy tons and tons and tons of them, but I actually got rid of them. There was not far away from where I live, there's a big army hospital for the guys that got injured in Afghanistan and the various wars. These young kids who have been severely injured. And I thought, you know what, I've got hundreds and hundreds of these movies, and I'm never going to watch them again. So I took them all down to the soldiers, because I thought that would be better than just be a nice addition to their library there. Now, that said, I have started to reinvest in movies that I really, really want to keep, because I fear with the advent of streaming and the times in which we live, a lot of films are getting edited because they're seen as problematic for whatever reasons. So I understand now that Aliens, the movie Aliens, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, comes with a warning on it because it might be deemed offensive, and I fear that a lot of the stuff that I like will end up being censored and not being kept in its original form. So I'm rebuying a lot of the ones that I love. Aside from that, no, I'm not a big collector at all. I was actually in a shop called the Forbidden Planet here in London the other day, and I was reeling at the prices of some of these statues. I mean, they're beautiful, but I as much as I love Superman, I can't see myself spending £400 on a bust of Superman. If I was rich, maybe I would, but it's not really my jam, man.
Okay, fair enough. And you make a good point. And I have also noticed recently that I think it's called Toys Wonderland is a retailer that we see a lot. I think Justin's Collection advertises Toys Wonderland a lot, and so does Robert. But they have some very interesting one quarter scale Roman figures like
Oh
Emperor
wow.
Augustus and Caesar. So I thought maybe you'd find that interesting as well. But I've also been looking at finding another way to kind of collect and put the figures together myself if I can get a proper head sculpt and then put clothes on the 1/6 scale figure. I mean, after all, I grew up doing this with my dolls, so I'm accustomed to kind of changing clothes around and stuff like that. But yeah, I've kind of tried to rethink how I would do some of my displays, even buying more inexpensive versions of stormtroopers that I found at Five Below, which is a dollar store here in the States. And I bought a bunch of those for a friend of mine who created a diorama for me. So I've been trying to think outside of the box, just sort of like, in a more economical way of trying to recreate some of these great scenes that we enjoy. So, I think it's incredibly generous of you to donate your collection to soldiers and veterans that way. That really was
Well,
very admirable
they
of you.
they certainly earned it. Now, look, I say that, but actually behind me here in my room, I've actually got a whole bag of stuff that my daughter, I brainwashed her into getting into Justice League animated. So I've got a whole bag of Justice Lords,
Oh, look at
Batman,
that.
and
Okay, that's cool.
Doomsday, and
Yes.
Hawkman, and Cheetah. So yeah, yeah, maybe I am a collector. I just didn't realize I was.
Well, you know what? There's all different types of collections, and I definitely want to explore a little bit more. As the series, as we in the PGS, we have many different types of collectors, and we definitely want to explore that so people know that it's like your collection is what you love, and as long as it's things that bring you joy, and it's important to you, then it's a special thing for you, and just enjoy these collections, no matter where they come from. So I'm
It just
glad you
reminded
showed
me
us.
of my daughter, because we used to, when she was old enough to understand what was going on the telly, I decided that she ought to get into Justice League because I quite liked it. So yeah, ever since she's been knee high to a grasshopper, and of course I would go onto eBay and buy her the toys, and she would put them up in her room and play with them. And then she's just she's 17 the other day, so she's probably moved past that now. But she kept all the cool ones. So she's bagged all these ones. Like, I don't want these anymore. You can do what you like with them. But like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Flash, and all the original, the 7 Justice League, they're still at her house with her mum. Yeah.
Well, happy birthday to her.
Thank you.
And now, outside of action and martial arts films, which are wonderful, what are some of your favorite directors and favorite movies right now?
Right now, I am a huge Zakalite. I'm a massive, massive, massive Zack Snyder fan, and have been since he came out with Dawn of the Dead. I couldn't, because I was a big fan. Who doesn't love zombie movies? I mean, come on, they're great. And that was around about the same time as 28 Days Later and all that. But I thought his version of Dawn of the Dead was absolute. It was kinetic. It was fantastic. It was the same movie, but not the same movie. And back in the day, and that was a long time ago now, Snyder struck me as pretty much, he was one of your own. The guy was a proper nerd, because when you got the special edition, the special features, you had he put in an extra couple of movies in there. One was about the guy that was in the other building across the road from them, and they had the extended newscast, and they had this brilliant commentary that told you everything about the making of the movie. So I was invested in him. And then I caught 300 that he did, which I was I loved the movie for what it was. but I was very disappointed. It wasn't the movie that I wanted. Let's just put it that way, because that was an adaptation of a comic, and having, because I'm really into the ancient Greek history, I really wanted a sort of Troy-esque version of that battle. But for what it was just, well, you'd never really seen anything like it, had we at the time. I thought that was brilliant. Watchmen. Oh my God, Watchmen,
Yeah,
especially
love
the
to
the
watch them.
super duper extended animated everything ultra cut
Hmm.
was absolutely fantastic. Um, and then, my goodness, so then he was booked on to do Man of Steel, and as a big Christopher Reeves fan, I was absolutely not sold on this at all. What do you mean there's no John Williams? What do you mean there's no underpants? I'm not having this. This is what they're going to put guitars in the theme. Oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing I've ever seen. But I off my off me and Sam went to watch it, and I sat there, my arms folded. "Oh, I'm not going to watch it. Oh, crap! Oh my God,
Hmm.
I did not think anything could top Superman the movie, and there are going to be hardcore fans out there going to call me a fake fan, but I thought Snyder and Cavill, they just elevated that character to this era. It is, and will remain one of my favorite films of all time. I just think he smashed it out of the park with that. I was very disappointed that Warner Brothers cut his legs away, cutting out 40 minutes of Batman versus Superman, which I thought was a genius movie once I saw the ultimate cut.
Hmm.
And then we had the whole thing. Unfortunately, the incident with his daughter, and then we had the Whedon cut of Justice League, and I remain devastated that Warner Brothers have got their fingers in their ear, and no matter how much we bang on the door saying we don't want J.J. Abrams Superman, we want Henry Cavill Superman, please can't we just have that thing completed? They're not going to do it. So it's one of the great shame. You know, it's one of my big regrets that we kind of almost got it, but I have to be happy with the Snyder Cut. I thought it was a work of absolute beauty and genius, and I cannot say enough good things about that movie. Um, I really enjoyed Army of the Dead. I know it's got its detractors, but I had a great time watching it. And I think people were saying, "Oh, it's a rip-off of this and it's a rip-off of that." But for me, it's not a rip-off. It's a complete homage. Snyder knows what he's doing. He knows what when he's putting in a bit from Aliens or a bit from Terminator. He knows that. In the same way that Quentin Tarantino has been ripping everything off forever. Like Kill Bill was just every martial arts movie you've ever seen, up to and including Game of Death.
Right.
But yeah, I'm a huge Zack Snyder fan. What else? Who else do I like? Oh my God. Okay, so I'm gonna get torn apart for this, but I'm a big fan of Paul W.S. Anderson. I absolutely love his movies. Event Horizon. I eat up the Resident Evil movies. I loved Aliens versus Predator, which I know people are going to go, yeah, boo, hiss. But if I ever got to sit down for a beer with Paul W.S. Anderson, I would ask him, is that actually the movie he really wanted to make? Because if you saw the previs stuff and you saw the pre-art, I don't really think that was the movie that he wanted to come out with. And I think having the dreaded PG-13 rating slapped on it stopped it from being what it was. And ultimately, if you take a step back, and I think it's getting more appreciation as years have gone by. I mean, it's never going to be a cinematic great like Aliens or Alien, but it did what it said on the tin. It had aliens, it had predators, they had a fight, and it was all good fun. But Event Horizon, I think, is his magnum opus. And again, it's a real shame that they lost so much of that footage, because apparently there's an extra hour or so of that movie which
Oh.
shows the hellscape, which we never got to see. Um, and you can't go wrong with Resident Evil. I just think those films are gloriously silly. The first one is great. That's a proper movie, and then the second one's it's a bit daft. The third one that he didn't direct had Russell Mulcair, the Highlander director, probably my favorite one. It was kind of like Mad Max meets zombies meets Super Mila Jovovich what's not to love in that. And then they just got increasingly sillier as time went on. James Cameron, I like a bit of James Cameron, but I think sort of earlier James Cameron. I mean, he hasn't done much in recent times. And obviously Ridley Scott is another one. But I find God, far be it for me to say, because the guy's an absolute genius, but I find his films nowadays are a bit hit and miss for me. I was very disappointed with Covenant and Prometheus, which seemed to fall between, as a hardcore Aliens fan, they seem to fall between two stools for me. And yes, I'm also partial to the guy that's called the worst director in film history, a guy called Uwe Boll, is a German director that's really famous for doing bad video game adaptations. But he's a lovely man. He's a really, really nice guy. And he is a guy whose passion was for making films. And he's a real shining example of it to anybody that wants to get into making movies. Yeah, he just persevered and he did it, and he made loads of films. What you like of them. But some they're great fun, and I quite enjoy them, even if they're not technically brilliant. But there you go; those are some of my favorites.
No, those are excellent choices, and I agree with you with Alien versus Predator. I believe that starred Sanaa Lathan, right?
It did indeed, yes.
And I was very surprised with the casting on that. And so as soon as I heard she was in it, I remember I asked my dad. I said, "Do you want to go see Alien versus Predator?" He said, "Sure." And that was one of the last films that I saw with him before he passed away. So I kind of always remember that film for that reason. Especially like in the storyline, like she loses her, well, it's so long ago, she loses her father in part of the story. And, at the time I did not know my father, was going to pass away, but it's kind of weird, but we enjoyed the film. Like we had a great time at that film. And I asked him, I said, "What did you think of this film?" And he was like, "It was incredible." And I'm like, "Good," but it was such an unusual approach, using her as a character in the film, in my opinion, but I liked it. So
why do you say it's an unusual approach?
Yes.
Why?
Because I just was not expecting Sanaa Lathan to be in an action and adventure film. She doesn't make movies like that. And so I was surprised to see her in it. So it added something different to it for me. And that's okay. I wasn't upset by it, just surprised to see her cast in there. So, but I liked the story of Alien versus Predator. So, maybe I'm different from everyone else, but I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I did too. I thought it expanded on the mythos. Apparently, it's not official canon now,
right?
But it did what it said on the tin, and I had a great time watching it. I had a better time with the DVD again. I really appreciate directors and filmmakers that go the extra mile on their special features, and I know, well, Rob and Dave Parker would know all about that with their 2-hour movie The Hills Run Red and 36 hours whatever it is of special features. Talk about going the extra mile there. But oh my god, and I would be remiss not to mention John McTiernan as a director, he of Predator and of course Die Hard, and Richard Donner, Superman, and Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, they're all fantastic. So I have another question for you.
Okay.
In 2014, you, Anthony Riches, and Ben Kane produced a film called the Ramoni Walk, which was narrated by Ian McKellen.
Yes,
Can you please tell us the concept?
How do you know about this? All right. Yeah. So what happened? Tony Riches and Ben Kane are two of the nicest guys that I have ever met. Honest to God, they're, in terms of authors, they're far much more successful than I am, and much better than I am. But I was first out of the gate, so I had my books out before they had their books out. And I remember writing to Tony when his first novel came out, and it was so good. It's such a good book. And Ben as well. He's written so many things. We're all writing in the same era. It was all in and around ancient Rome. And we met up at a historical novelist conference, I think, and been all of a similar age. We decided we were going to go out, and we had, I would say, about 10 beers too many, and therein began a friendship. So we were out at a pub the one day, and Tony has done this charity walk uh, to raise money for Help for Heroes, which is a military charity here, and we were talking about that. And then Ben turns around and says, "Oh, we should all do it. We should all get dressed up in Roman armor and walk from Hadrian, walk across Hadrian's Wall, which is about 94 miles at the top end of England." And I'm like, yeah. Of course I'll do it. And then Ben's on the phone the next day, and we ended up kind of being committed to this project, and walking around in Roman armor. It weighs about, I can't. It's 4 stone, and I can't tell you what that is in kilos, but it was
60
really.
pounds, maybe?
I know it was heavy. It was really heavy,
30
and I had
kilos?
I had the heaviest kit on at the time because I was training for an event called Tough Mudder, which is like an assault course. So I got lumbered with everything on that one, and it was miserable, and I hated every step of it. But we raised a lot of money for help for combat stress. This one was for, and Médecins Sans Frontières.
Wow.
And I swore I'd never do it again until the next time I ended up in the pub with Tony and Ben, and we all got horrendously drunk, and I agreed to do the second one, and that was going to be in Italy. And the Romani walk, they decided they were going to film it, and I had no idea they were going to film it, but they did. And I had tried to train for this particular walk, but the shoes, the Roman boots that I bought, they'd cost a fortune, but they weren't particularly well made. Sorry to whoever made the books, but they tore my feet to pieces.
Ooh.
So every time I would go out and walk, we had to walk around about, it was supposed to be 20 miles a day, I think, or 20 kilometers a day. I can't remember which it was. And I was unprepared. I was really, really unprepared for this walk. So we started off, and I think, within the first 3 miles, I was struggling. My feet were torn to bits, and the shield was too heavy. So if you ever watch a reality TV show, and there's the bloke on there that everybody hates that keeps complaining all the time, that was me. So I didn't really cover myself in glory on that one, but we did it. And again, we raised quite a bit of money for Médecins Sans Frontières and combat stress. And afterwards we were trying to find someone to narrate the movie, and we were looking at a historian here, she's quite famous in the UK, called Bethany Hughes, and I was mad keen to get Sean Bean because he's Sean Bean. But then Tony got a hold of Sir Ian, and Sir Ian came down, and you couldn't ask to meet a lovelier chap. And I actually put in the script of it, and none shall pass. And McKellen's like sat in the recording studio, and he looks up and he goes, "And none shall pass." Like that. He's looking straight at the director like that. But yeah, he was a brilliant bloke, and he was outside, chain smoking. And but it was, I look back on it as an amazing experience. But I can't say it was fun to do at the time, because there were good times on it, but it was tough. It was really, really hard. And however, having said that, here's me whinging about it. For the people that we were raising the money for, it was absolutely nothing. Those soldiers and the places that Médecins Sans Frontières go into, that's truly hardcore. So I shouldn't really complain about it. But yeah, so if anybody likes action and adventure, historical stuff, Tony and Ben, I can't recommend those two guys highly enough. They're fantastic authors, and they are lovely blokes as well.
Well, I have to say, I've actually watched Romani Walk the other day, and it was a great film. Some of the things I feel that stood out, and it is true. It's hard to understand, only because I was completely unaware that your armor weighed that much. And it just looks like you guys are walking with armor on, but I didn't know that it was 60 pounds or,
it's not 60 pounds. It's quite, the stuff I was wearing in the second one wasn't as heavy as the stuff I had on for the one in the UK. That was chain mail. That was heavy. I think Ben was wearing the chainmail for the second one, but he hurt himself,
Right.
which was really, which is a real shame, because he was the real driving force behind it, and he hurt himself on day one, and he had to step out for a couple of days. And of course, it was getting filmed, and he was devastated. So Tony and I had to do the bulk of it, and honest to God, I really felt for Ben. We were devastated for him. We really wanted him to take part, but I'm glad you watched it anyway, and I hope you got a laugh at my expense.
Well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't so much that. It was, I don't normally see people trekking around with so much armor and giant shields like that. That's definitely something, unless you're going to like a Comic-Con, and you're not walking 90 miles on a Comic-Con. And that shield alone, like, it was enormous. I always imagined what an authentic shield would look like for a soldier of that time period. And that's not what I imagined it to be. And of course it must have been heavy. Of course it must be durable, in order to use it in battle. And of course they had to carry them with them. Like, in order to use it, you have to carry it. So, I think that that's a very interesting approach to looking at what soldiers go through for a fundraiser, addressing combat stress, but also historically speaking. You're traveling on well-known historical roads during the time period. And, that also is very thrilling. It's educational, and it's a very unique concept to making a film like that.
Well, certainly helped Tony and Ben, because they write, I write about gladiators really, but they write, hardcore military fiction. So for them, it was really, really helpful to wear the kit and go on the march. To actually feel what these soldiers would have been feeling, and being three authors for Tony's from Liverpool, Ben's Irish, and I'm from Southwest London. These kind of middle-aged guys doing it, that you can only imagine how hard those legionaries were, because not only did they have to walk all of that way carrying all of that kit, then at the end of the day they would then build a marching camp where everybody had to dig a 3 foot by 3 foot hole, and they would put up a ditch and ramparts and tents and everything like that. And then they would leave the camp and they'd go on for another day and do the same thing at the end of every day. These men were incredibly tough people, hard times to live in. And
what footwear were those soldiers wearing?
Well, I decided I was going to get some cavalry boots, which was a mistake. I know that sounds silly, but basically they were hobnailed shoes. What Tony is wearing in the film were more standard Roman footwear. They're called caligae, which is basically sandals. They're hobnailed sandals, which is where the Emperor Caligula got his name from, because when he was little, he was with the army with his dad, and they called him Caligula, which means little boots. So they made him a little pair of army boots. So yeah, they're basically sandals with hobnails on them.
Well, that's impressive, and I don't hear many stories like that. So it's definitely unique, and it's for a good cause, and it certainly was entertaining to watch. So anyone who's watching this, please check out Romani Walk.
Please don't.
And Russ, what movies are you looking forward to seeing this year, the rest of 2021?
Oh, we're nearly at the end of 2021. I can't believe that this another year of lockdown and madness has passed us by. I've seen a lot of great ones. I was really excited to see. Look, for me, it didn't get any better than this year with the Snyder Cut. I mean, that was all of my cinematic dreams coming true in one go. The fight that we put up to get it made, and the final, I wouldn't say capitulation of Warner Brothers, but the circumstances that led up to it, as a plus point of the lockdown, if you like, and the fact that they released, they've got HBO Max, they needed content, and there it was. So that was brilliant. I was really, really looking forward to Mortal Kombat, and I really enjoyed it, and I quite liked Louis Tan's performance in that. Going forward, I don't know if it's coming out this year, but John Wick 4, I'm looking forward to that. And I quite fancy, like I say, I can take or leave Marvel movies, but The Eternals looks good because it's got a couple of my favorites in there. It's got Angelina Jolie, it's got Selma Hayek. What's not to love? I mean, I'll go and see that all day of the week, And I don't know if James Bond is coming out this year, and I'm not a huge James Bond fan, but I recently hooked on to a YouTube channel, and I wish I could give them a shout out, but I can't remember. But the guy was basically doing an in-depth analysis of all the Daniel Craig movies. What he was picking up on these movies, because I hadn't gotten this out of the films, so I kind of want to go back and rewatch those, and then go see the next one, to top and tail that movie cycle. I think it's nice that Craig's Bond will have a beginning, middle end to his. I wonder if they'll kill him off. I wonder if they'll kill him off at the end.
Oh dear, I hope not.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to those ones, but I think we just don't know, do we, Aaron, because of the scheduling and the need to make money. I mean, look, Maverick, Top Gun. Oh my God, the trailer to that just looks immense. And they seem to have totally nailed the feel of the old 80s movie. I don't know if Val Kilmer is going to be in it. I saw his documentary, Val. It's a terrible shame that he's got this issue with his voice now.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a scene in that trailer when Maverick says to the guy, "Oh, I didn't expect to be invited back," and the guy goes, "They called orders, Maverick." And that to me it was like a line ripped out of the 80s and put into this modern movie. So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the Batman. The Batman looks really good. Far be it. I'll say it again. I want the Snyderverse to continue, and I know it is continuing in certain ways, but I really hope that they go on with Henry Cavill. But if they don't, Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck, who was chef's kiss good as Batman, he was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The Batman with Pattinson looks great, and I think there's been some previews of that, and people are saying it's essentially a horror movie, and I really hope that that's true. I'd love to see this really dark version of Batman, which I know they did with Christian Bale, but when you look back at the gruff Batman voice and all that sort of thing, which I know has become a meme now, and I feel that they've learned from that, and all these like little bits of campiness and silliness that weren't even supposed to be camp and silly, but now when you look back on them 10-15 years later, they are. I hope that this one is the, dare I say, the Batman film we deserve.
Well, I love Patterson. I've always loved him from day one, and I love Cavill. So anything that he's in, I watch, and the same for Patterson. So I think that they're pretty much what we want to see more of them. There's no other way to say it. And so let's just hope that our prayers are answered. Yes, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything else that you would like your fans and PGS members to know?
I'm not sure I have any fans, but yeah, I can give you a PGS exclusive. So I've written a martial arts movie called The Arena, and we're currently in the process of financing that film at the moment. But the producers have signed a mixed martial artist, bare knuckles fighter called Paige Van Zandt, I think she's got something like 3 million followers on social media. It'll be her first film role. So Paige is a star in her own right, and this is the first time anybody's finding out about that. So she's signed on. So please God, we can raise the rest of the money, and we will have that movie, which I think, if they do it, we'll shoot in South Africa in the fall of next year. Also signed on for that project is an up-and-coming martial arts star called Jenny Umbao, and she is in the HBO TV show Warrior. And Warrior is kind of helpful for us because it's shot in South Africa and we could use the stunties. So we're kind of trying to time it to be the same time with that. So yeah, Paige Van Zandt, The Arena, first starring role. If we can raise the money, I'm sure she'll be a big hit.
That is exciting news. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm sure the other PGS members are also looking forward to that. Russ, where can PGS members and fans find you?
I'm not really on social media or anything like that. Or I've got a website which is about 1,000 years out of date now, but it's russellwhitfield.com. So it's RUSSELL Whitfield.com, and my email address is on there if you want to drop me a line and shoot the shit about ancient Rome or karate movies. I'm always up for it. Or I'm often in the chat on Midnight Metal, because Midnight Metal on a Friday night, your show is on a Saturday morning for me, so I do try to log in there. And funny enough, I was teasing Dieter Bastian online the other day, because I said to him, as the world's second biggest Scott Adkins fan, what do you think about this? Because apparently Dieter Bastian is as into Scott Adkins as I am, so we had a bit of a laugh about that. Yeah, so that's where you can find me, should you want to.
Excellent. So everyone, you can find Russell at russellwhitfield.com, at his website, where his email address is. And I did want to thank you, Russ, for joining us today on PGS All-Stars. And everybody watching, please check out all the PGS All-Stars episodes to find out more about the creators in our community. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me on, RM. I really enjoyed it. So nice of you to invite me, and
yes.
I hope it was not too boring for your fans.
No, it was wonderful. We so appreciate you taking the time out to share, all of your interests, as well as your creative projects that are coming, that you've done in the past, and the ones that are coming down the pike. So it's very exciting to see PGS members doing things like this. And that's the whole purpose of PGS All-Stars, is to find out more about the creators around us. So, just thank you for coming on. And everybody, please check out more episodes to find out more about the creators in our community. Take care, everybody. And remember, be kind.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.